Welcome to Radio US. One of the most notable aspects of Trump's speech was his call for a substantial reduction in US military spending. As part of his broader foreign policy vision, Trump emphasized that the US and other major global powers, such as Russia and China, already possessed more than enough nuclear weapons to ensure national security. He pointed out that the current military infrastructure, particularly in terms of nuclear armament, had reached a point where further expansion would only serve to exacerbate tensions without contributing to actual security. The Trump news conference highlighted the president's stance on nuclear disarmament and his belief that the US and other nuclear powers should focus on reducing military expenditures as opposed to continuing to build and expand nuclear arsenals. Trump was adamant that this strategy was not only more practical, but necessary, given the current geopolitical climate and the ever-increasing threats posed by global instability. In his remarks, Trump acknowledged the financial burden that continued military expansion placed on the American economy. He proposed that the funds currently allocated to military spending, particularly those aimed at developing new nuclear weapons, should be redirected to more urgent and impactful domestic needs, such as infrastructure, healthcare, and education. This, he argued, would not only provide Americans with tangible benefits, but also contribute to a more secure and stable country in the long run. By reallocating these resources, the United States could improve its infrastructure, promote technological innovations, and provide better services for its citizens. Additionally, Trump argued that cutting military spending could ease the global arms race, reduce tensions between nuclear powers, and allow for a new framework of international cooperation based on shared goals, not competition. Trump's proposal to shift focus from military expansion to domestic investment was not only a pragmatic approach to US fiscal policy, but also a critical re-evaluation of what national security should look like in the modern era. While many saw military spending as a cornerstone of global power and security, Trump believed that true national security came from economic strength, technological innovation, and strategic alliances rather than the sheer accumulation of weapons. In his Trump news conference, Trump also delved into the topic of global trade, with a particular focus on the European Union, EU. The president was unrelenting in his criticism of the EU's economic policies, which he believed were deliberately designed to disadvantage American companies and hinder fair competition. According to Trump, the EU imposed high tariffs on US goods while simultaneously maintaining strict regulations that stifled innovation and limited American businesses' ability to thrive within European markets. He cited the EU's taxation policies as a prime example of how certain global players had manipulated the system to benefit their own economies at the expense of American enterprises. For Trump, this was a clear example of how the US had been subjected to an uneven playing field for far too long. During the Trump news conference, he emphasized that the EU's approach undermined the core principles of free and fair trade. Trump's criticism was particularly sharp regarding the EU's tax policies, which he claimed disproportionately affected US companies, especially those in the tech industry, including major players like Google and Apple. He argued that these policies stifled innovation, created unnecessary barriers for US businesses, and led to a scenario where American companies were at a competitive disadvantage in the European market. Trump's criticisms extended beyond the EU to its treatment of American companies, which he argued had been unfairly penalized through excessive regulations and a lack of reciprocity in trade practices. His message was clear. The US needed to re-evaluate its economic relationship with the EU and take a more assertive stance in negotiations. Trump's administration sought to implement policies that would force the EU to reconsider its approach and create a more level playing field for US businesses. He outlined a future where American firms could operate in global markets without facing discriminatory practices from foreign governments, particularly the EU. Trump's remarks on international relations during the Trump News Conference also took aim at Canada. While the US and Canada share a close geographical and economic relationship, Trump pointed out that Canada had, in his view, failed to contribute adequately to shared defense initiatives. He criticized Canada for benefiting from US military support without making sufficient investments in its own defense infrastructure. This, according to Trump, was a form of economic and military exploitation, where Canada took advantage of US resources without providing a fair contribution to their shared security. Trump's comments about Canada echoed his broader concerns about free riding in international relations. He argued that the US should not bear the brunt of global defense efforts while other nations, particularly those with the economic capacity to do more, remained passive in their contributions. This, he suggested, was a significant burden on American taxpayers and military resources. Trump's call for Canada and other NATO allies to pay their fair share of defense spending reflected his America First policy, which prioritized the interests of US citizens and sought to realign the financial responsibilities of international partnerships. Trump's critique of Canada extended beyond military matters to trade issues. He expressed frustration with the trade imbalances that existed between the two nations, particularly in sectors like agriculture. Trump believed that Canada, much like the EU, had imposed tariffs and trade barriers that hindered US businesses. He suggested that these policies were one-sided and in need of revision. By restructuring trade agreements and military contributions, Trump believed that both the US and Canada could create a more equitable relationship, benefiting both countries economically while ensuring shared security responsibilities. The overarching theme of Trump's Trump News Conference was the need for fairness in trade and international relations. The president's remarks on the EU and Canada highlighted his desire to ensure that American companies and taxpayers were no longer exploited by foreign policies. The use of reciprocal tariffs was central to this vision. Trump believed that by implementing tariffs that mirrored the actions of countries like China and India, the US could force a more balanced and fair trade environment. Trump's focus on fairness extended to the agricultural sector as well. He argued that tariffs would protect American farmers from unfair competition and the harmful effects of agricultural dumping. With these measures in place, the US could ensure that its agricultural industry could compete on an even playing field, ultimately benefiting American consumers by stabilizing prices and securing a steady domestic food supply. The long-term goal was to make the US less reliant on foreign imports and more self-sufficient, ensuring that domestic production could thrive and that American workers, particularly those in the agricultural sector, had a stable and secure future. The remarks made by President Trump during the Trump News Conference underscored his vision for a more self-reliant and competitive United States. His approach to military spending, foreign relations with the EU and Canada, and strategic use of tariffs was designed to recalibrate the US's position in global trade and security. By reducing unnecessary military expenditures, holding international partners accountable, and fostering a more fair and balanced trade environment, Trump aimed to ensure that America remained not only economically strong, but also globally dominant in both security and industry. Trump's administration believed that these policies would provide long-term benefits for the American people, strengthening the domestic economy and ensuring that the U.S. could face future challenges with confidence. As the global landscape continues to evolve, Trump's vision for a fairer, more competitive, and self-sufficient America remains a cornerstone of his political philosophy, one that strives to put American interests first while encouraging international cooperation in areas of mutual benefit.